Recently I did a review of the Viltrox 53mm T1.5 Cine lens. Now we're doing a review of the Viltrox 56mm T1.5. And naturally, we're going to put it up against the Sigma 56mm f1.4. Welcome back to the channel. So the Viltrox 56mm T1.5 is the third lens in the Viltrox Cine S lineup. You get a 23, a 33, as well as the 56mm. Now, in case you haven't watched the 23mm review, I'm going to quickly touch on what is Tstop versus Fstop. Basically, Fstop is your aperture measurement of how much light comes into the lens. However, Tstop is the measurement of how much light actually hits the sensor. That's pretty much a very simple way of explaining that. In the real world, if you took two f1.4 lenses and you put them on your camera and you swap them out, you'd see that if you kept your shutter speed and ISO the same, the exposure would probably change, because f1.4 on one lens may not be the exact same exposure as f1.4 on another. However, when it comes to Tstop, that's very different. You can swap out a lens at T2 and put another lens on that's also at T2, and the light hitting the sensor would be the same. This makes it a lot easier on set to swap out lenses without having to change the settings of the camera. So what happens when you compare f1.4 to T1.5? They are pretty close. Let's have a look. Here is the Viltrox 56mm, and this is wide open at T1.5, and this is the current exposure that you get. Here is the Sigma 56mm 1.4 at f1.4, and this is the exposure. Keep in mind that the shutter and the ISO have not changed. Now, there is a slight difference in exposure there. However, a lot of it appears on the contrast, which is pretty much what would normally happen. Now, some people say that an f1.4 lens is more comparable to something like a T1.8 lens. However, T1.5 is generally a lot brighter than, say, f1.5. Range. Now, as I mentioned, this is the third lens in the lineup, the 56mm, and I'm using this on a micro four thirds camera. So essentially I'm getting 112mm focal length. Now, the bokeh out of the 56mm T1.5 is amazing. Longer focal range, more bokeh, always a win. And much like you saw on the review of the 23mm, the bokeh is soft, it's creamy, it's very pleasing to the eye, and it does give you that cinematic kind of feel. I've always been someone that loves more compression and telephoto lenses, so when it comes to longer ranges like a 56mm, some people may look at that as a negative. For me, I see it as a positive. I much prefer to film and photograph at longer focal ranges. It just gives you that separation. People don't look distorted, and ideally you can be more selective with your background when it comes to a longer range lens. Now, these lenses are available in E-mount as well as micro four thirds, so depending on your camera, you can obviously work out your focal range from the 23, 33 and 56mm. Build quality. Now, when I tell you these things are built like absolute tanks, I am not lying. It's a solid chunk of heavy metal. In actual fact, let me weigh it for you. With all the lens caps removed, 543 grams. Absolute little beast. Now, if you're worried about the weight, based on the fact that camera bodies have become so small, larger lenses kind of feel a bit out of place, but because these lenses are so compact yet so heavy, it feels very stable when you put it on your camera. It just feels like almost kind of feels like you're holding a solid brick. It's not weighted too much in the front or at the back, it's kind of even throughout. The manual, focus ring, as well as the aperture ring are very, very smooth. The aperture ring sometimes feels a little bit too smooth for me. Sometimes if I'm filming at, say, T1.5, I'd accidentally shift it and move it to about T2, and it's kind of off-putting, but it's probably just user error, and I think over time you probably get used to not doing that. However, when I do put it on my rig and I've got my follow focus wheel on it, then obviously you don't end up touching it whatsoever. As for comparing these lenses to each other, the 23mm and the 56mm are both identical, and in true Cine lens fashion, the focus ring and the aperture ring are in the exact same place. So when you are swapping it out on your rig, absolute bonus, you don't have to move anything around. Now, I can't tell you if the color production across all three lenses is identical. However, when I do get my hands on the 33mm, I'll do that test for you. And yes, each lens across the range uses the same 62mm thread in the front. So if you've got expensive NDs, you can swap them out. Video and picture quality. Now, this is probably the reason that you came here and you want to see what this lens produces. Okay, so why am I comparing this to the Sigma 56mm 1.4? Obviously, if you're looking at buying this lens, this isn't the lens that you're going to be looking at buying or deciding between. They're two very separate lenses across the spectrum. And yes, one is a cine lens and this is what you would call a normal lens. On one hand, the Sigma 56mm 1.4 is actually used more for photos. People do use it for video. And the cine lens is dedicated for video. But the reason I'm doing it is because this is kind of the benchmark when it comes to 56mm in the APS-C kind of range. The Sigma 56mm is insanely sharp. This is about as perfect as a lens can be manufactured for photos. Now yes, you probably don't want this perfection when it comes to video, you're looking for a softer look, but it's a good benchmark and I'm going to show you. So here is the Viltrox 56mm wide open at T1.5 and this is the Sigma wide open at f1.4. Side by side they look pretty similar, but when punching into 300% you can see that the Sigma is ever so sharper. So if you're a cine lens lover, this is probably what you'd appreciate. You'd lean more towards the Viltrox 56mm because it's not as sharp. But if you're a sharpness snob and you really love super sharp stuff, and I do too, so for that case I'm going to add a fraction bit of sharpness in Final Cut just to compare it what it would look like against the Sigma. And if you look at them side by side, now they look identical and you actually can't tell which one is which. That pretty much puts this lens in a place where most people are gonna love it. As for chromatic aberration, this lens is okay. I have seen lenses that are downright terrible, but there's something about a chromatic aberration that no one really talks about. This lens is good enough that the topic of chromatic aberration doesn't have to be brought up every single time. Sure, if this lens was $1,000, $2,000 plus, then definitely it shouldn't produce any chromatic aberration. But at $415, this lens does extremely well. Basically, in everyday shots, you're not going to be blinded by chromatic aberration. I know a lot of people do the tree test or this test and they put this ultra bright light at the back and this high contrast in the front. And yes, that is one way to pull out chromatic aberration. But as someone that creates videos a lot, you don't often put your lenses in situations like that and get chromatic aberration. And that's why I talk about real world testing. If I take a real world shot and there's highlights behind someone and you're not getting this ultra glow of chromatic aberration on their hair or their skin, then that's fine. Yes, it would be great to have nothing, but for the 1 or 2 shots a year where you're going to have a ton of chromatic aberration, you can remove that in post in editing. One more thing, if you're wondering about lens flares, like most cine lenses, as soon as the light hits the lens, you kind of have this contrast reduction, but what makes that kind of easy is you can actually just add a little bit of contrast in post and it disappears, but you don't get this outrageous, crazy lens flare. Conclusion. The Viltrox 56mm T1.5 is nothing short of amazing. Honestly, I can't wait to get the 33mm, have the entire set, and I can do a video for you guys and show you what a set can do. Viltrox has delivered a great lens. Even when you look at focus breathing, it's pretty much non-existent on these lenses. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Please smash the like button and make sure to come back for that review of the 33mm. That's it from me. Wherever you are in the world, have a good day, good evening, good night, goodbye.